His breath hitched a knot, tightening deep in his chest. Through a grimy crack in the doorway, the scene unfolded with a stark, painful clarity that seared itself into his mind. 2 small chipped plates on a rickety table. 1 meager piece of restaurant-grade chicken carefully, lovingly split between them. 2 little girls, Lily and Emily, their eyes bright with a desperate, innocent joy as they ate. And Sarah, his quiet, diligent cleaner from the golden plate. She sat with them, her own plate starkly empty. A glass of water seemed to be her only share of the evening meal. Yet on her weary face was a smile of such profound love as she watched her children eat, a smile that concealed an ocean of sacrifice, a smile that tore at the very soul of the rich man, James Anderson, secretly watching from the shadows. What hidden life had he truly stumbled upon? And how deep did this mother's silent, heartbreaking sacrifice run? What unseen battles are fought just beyond our gaze every single day? Share your thoughts on such quiet heroism in the comments below, and subscribe to discover the unbelievable journey that unfolds from this one shattering moment. The vast, polished expanse of the Golden Plate restaurant gleamed under the soft glow of the dimmed chandeliers. It was well past midnight, and the last of the city's elite had long since departed, leaving behind the phantom scent of expensive perfume and the lingering aroma of gourmet cuisine. In this quiet, opulent world, Sarah moved like a ghost, her presence marked only by the gentle swish of her mop and the rhythmic clink of cleaning supplies. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed a woman etched with a weariness that settled deep in her bones, a stark contrast to the glittering city lights that formed a backdrop to her solitary labor. Yet her hands, though calloused and tired, worked with a meticulous precision. Every table leg was wiped, every crumb vanished, every surface left spotless, ready to receive the next wave of wealthy patrons who would never know her name, nor the quiet dignity with which she performed her tasks. Sarah understood the hierarchy of this world. She was a cleaner, a necessary but invisible cog in a machine that catered to luxury. There was a ritual to the end of her shift, one that set her apart from the other late-night staff who hurried home. As the kitchen staff finished their own cleanup, a symphony of clattering pans and shouted good nights echoing in the cavernous space, Sarah would approach, hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, chef," she'd say, her eyes typically downcast, addressing the burly head chef, a man named Marco, who for all his kitchen bluster had a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes when he saw her. Would there be any suitable leftovers tonight? Anything that might otherwise be discarded. It was always the same request. Not for money, though. Surely she needed it. Not for an advance nor a complaint about the long hours. Just food. Good food. Yes, the kind served on fine china hours earlier, but leftovers nonetheless. Marco Gruff, but not unkind, would usually nod towards a neatly packed container or two. "Take it, Sarah. Better you than the bin." And Sarah would offer a genuine quiet, "Thank you, chef." "God bless you," her fingers briefly clutching the worn, silver-toned bracelet on her wrist. A simple, almost childlike charm bracelet, its tiny tarnished bells making no sound. It was a habit that touched a fleeting connection to something unseen, a silent prayer, perhaps, before she carefully placed the containers into her worn shoulder bag. Tonight, like many nights recently, James Anderson, the owner of the Golden Plate and a string of other successful establishments, found himself in his glass-walled office overlooking the main dining area. He was a man accustomed to observing, to noticing details others missed. It was part of what made him a formidable businessman. He'd initially dismissed Sarah's late-night requests as a common enough occurrence in the service industry. But her consistency, her quiet humility, the way she only ever asked for food, never anything more, had begun to pique a reluctant curiosity within him. He'd seen desperation before, and greed, and 1,000 other human failings. Sarah's quiet persistence felt different. There was a profound lack of entitlement in her demeanor that was both puzzling and, in a strange way, compelling. He watched her now as she collected her package from Chef Marco. She was slender, almost frail-looking, under the harsh fluorescent light of the kitchen pass-through. Her uniform, though clean, hung a little loose. He noted the way she cradled the containers as if they were precious. What was her story, most of his staff, if they were struggling, would find a way to ask for a raise, or at least hint at their troubles. Sarah remained an enigma, her personal life, a closed book. Sarah, oblivious to her employer's scrutiny, made her way to the staff locker room. As she changed, the weariness she'd held at bay began to seep into her expression, softening the careful neutrality she maintained while on duty. Her thoughts drifted, as they always did, on the long bus ride home to Lily and Emily, her girls. A faint smile touched her lips as she remembered Emily's question. From that morning, her small face a mask of utmost seriousness. Mummy Emily had asked, her brow furrowed, "If the stars are giant fireballs, why don't they fall down and burn our roof?" The memory brought a warmth that momentarily eased the ache in her back. It was for those innocent questions, for Lily's shy hugs, and Emily's bright, curious eyes that she endured these long nights, these silent, solitary tasks. The worn bracelet, a gift from her own mother years ago, felt cool against her skin as she adjusted her bag, the weight of the leftover food a small, tangible promise. Back in his office, Mr. Anderson frowned, his gaze distant. He'd built an empire on understanding people, on predicting market trends and human behavior. Yet this one cleaner, this Sarah, presented a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. There was a story there, he was sure of it, a story that went beyond simple need. It was in the quiet set of her jaw, the flicker of an old pain in her eyes, when she thought no one was looking, the almost reverent way she handled a box of leftover risotto. He made a mental note. Tomorrow he'd have a discreet word with Mrs. Gable, the HR manager. Not an investigation, nothing that would alarm anyone. Just a few general inquiries, perhaps an address on file, a note about her tenure, her attendance, standard information. But as he locked his office and headed towards the private elevator, a deeper, unacknowledged question lingered in his mind. It wasn't just about company records. He felt an unfamiliar, stirring a disquiet that had little to do with business, and everything to do with the woman who walked out into the pre-dawn chill, clutching a bag of his restaurant's discarded luxuries as if they were treasures. He wanted to understand the source of that quiet, unwavering pain he sometimes glimpsed behind her carefully constructed composure. He wanted to know what lay behind Sarah's silent smile. The following morning, the image of Sarah's tired face and the quiet dignity with which she accepted the leftover food still lingered in James Anderson's mind, an unwelcome guest amidst the usual cacophony of market reports and strategic plans. His conversation with Mrs. Gable, the HR manager, had yielded little beyond the expected. Sarah was, according to her file, Sarah Miller, single. 2 dependents listed ages 6 and 8. Address on file was in a less affluent, but not overtly alarming part of the city. Punctual, diligent, no complaints lodged, no incidents reported. On paper, she was an unremarkable model employee. But Mr. Anderson was a man who trusted his gut, and his gut told him the paper file was missing the heart of the story. The memory of her clutching that worn silver bracelet, the almost reverent way she handled the food containers. It didn't align with the sterile data on Mrs. Gable's screen. His mind replayed a brief interaction from a few weeks prior, an incident so minor he hadn't given it a second thought until now. He'd been striding through the main service corridor, preoccupied with a rather heated phone call regarding a new supplier contract, when Sarah had been exiting a utility closet, her arms laden with cleaning supplies. To avoid a collision, she'd pressed herself flat against the wall, her head bowed. One of the spray bottles had slipped clattering to the floor. He'd barely paused, his call just shot her a sharp, irritated glance. "Watch yourself." He'd clipped his tone harsher than necessary, his mind already back on the problematic clauses of the contract. Sarah had flinched almost imperceptibly. "My sincerest apologies, Mr. Anderson. It was entirely my fault. It won't happen again, sir." Her voice had been low, overly formal and tight, with an anxiety that seemed disproportionate to the minor offense of a dropped bottle. At the time, he'd registered it only as an employee, being overly deferential, perhaps a little clumsy. Now, recalling the incident, a faint discomfort pricked at him. Had that been fear in her eyes, or something else? The memory re-examined left a bitter taste. He was a man of action, not idle speculation. If the official channels yielded nothing, he'd find another way. The thought of directly confronting Sarah felt wrong, intrusive. It would put her on the spot, create an imbalance of power even greater than the one that already existed. No, if he was to understand, he needed to see for himself, unseen. That evening, Mr. Anderson left his final meeting an hour earlier than usual, a rare occurrence. He drove his sleek, dark sedan, a vehicle that whispered of quiet power and understated wealth, not towards his own gated community, but to a discreet parking spot across from the Golden Plate's staff exit. He felt a ridiculous twinge of something akin to a spy in a B-grade movie, a billionaire CEO hiding in plain sight, waiting to tail one of his lowest-paid employees. He adjusted his rearview mirror, a grim set to his jaw. It was unorthodox, certainly, perhaps even a little absurd, but the gnawing need to understand, to unravel the quiet mystery of Sarah Miller, had taken root. Just after her usual time, Sarah emerged, her worn shoulder bag, looking a little fuller tonight. She walked with that same tired but steady gait, her head slightly bowed against the evening chill. She didn't look left or right, just set off down the street. Mr. Anderson waited until she was 100 yards ahead, then slowly pulled out his headlights dimmed. He kept a careful distance, his years of navigating complex business deals somehow translating into an unexpected aptitude for cautious pursuit. Sarah walked several blocks, her pace quick and purposeful, before turning onto a busier thoroughfare, where she waited at a bus stop. When the lumbering, brightly lit bus arrived with a hiss of its pneumatic doors, she boarded, blending in with the weary end-of-day commuters. Mr. Anderson followed the bus. The journey was slow, punctuated by frequent stops and the jarring sounds of city traffic. His sedan, usually a cocoon of serene luxury, felt conspicuously out of place as the bus rumbled into neighborhoods where the streetlights were fewer, the buildings more crowded, the gloss of downtown giving way to a grittier urban reality. He saw faces peer out from dimly lit windows, children playing in dusty alleyways under the fading light. Each stop the bus made, he felt a growing sense of unease, a premonition that the story he was uncovering would be far removed from anything he had initially imagined. He nearly lost her twice, once when the bus made an unexpected turn down a narrow one-way street, forcing him into a hasty, less than elegant U-turn that drew a few curious stares, and again when a delivery truck momentarily blocked his view at a crucial intersection. He, James Anderson, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with unwavering composure, found himself muttering under his breath, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, a strange mixture of frustration and an almost boyish thrill of the chase clouding his usual sharp focus. After what felt like an eternity, but was perhaps closer to 45 minutes, the bus pulled into a depot in a part of the city he barely recognized, an area where the air itself seemed heavier, imbued with the struggles of its inhabitants. Sarah alighted her figure, looking smaller, more vulnerable against the backdrop of decaying storefronts and graffiti-scarred walls. She didn't pause, didn't look around, just turned and began to walk down a narrow, unpaved side street, little more than an alleyway between two looming, dilapidated apartment blocks. The streetlights here were mostly broken, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to swallow the path ahead. Mr. Anderson parked his car at the mouth of the alley, the polished hood of his vehicle already looking sullied by the grim surroundings. He switched off the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the distant wail of a siren and the closer, more unsettling sound of angry shouts purus from an unseen window. He hesitated for a moment, a cold knot forming in his stomach. This was not just a poorer part of town. This felt like the very edge of despair. With a deep breath, he stepped out of his car, the expensive leather of his shoes crunching on unseen debris. He kept to the shadows, his heart pounding, with an unfamiliar mixture of apprehension and a resolute, undeniable need to see this through, to witness the truth, however unpalatable it might be. The answer to Sarah's quiet pain, he sensed, lay just ahead, hidden in the deepening darkness of this forgotten street. The air in the narrow alleyway was thick with the smell of damp stone and neglect. James Anderson moved slowly each step, a conscious effort to remain unheard, his expensive shoes utterly alien to the broken pavement littered with unseen refuse. The darkness was almost absolute, broken only by the faint, flickering orange glow from a distant, unshielded bulb and the sliver of moonlight that managed to pierce the oppressive gloom between the towering, derelict buildings. He could hear the scurry of unseen creatures in the shadows, a sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. This was a world away from the polished marble and hushed efficiency of his life, a raw, forgotten underbelly of the city he thought he knew. Sarah had disappeared through a battered doorway at the far end of a crumbling tenement, a building that looked as though it might sigh and collapse in on itself at any moment. Mr. Anderson followed his heart a tight drum against his ribs. The communal hallway inside was no better. Peeling paint, a single dim bulb, casting more shadows than light, and the pervasive scent of poverty, a mixture of stale cooking odors, dampened unnameable sorrows. He heard Sarah's footsteps ascend a rickety flight of stairs. He waited a beat, then followed his own steps, creaking ominously on the worn wood. He found her on the third landing. The door to her apartment, if one could call it that, was slightly ajar, perhaps, to let in a sliver of the hallway's meager light, or maybe the lock was broken. It offered him a narrow, obstructed view into a tiny, cramped room. He pressed himself into the deeper shadows of the landing, his breath held tight in his chest. What he saw through that gap was a scene that would be seared into his memory forever. The room was impossibly small, the walls stained and cracked. A single bare bulb hung from a frayed wire, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on the meager furnishings. A thin mattress on the floor in one corner, a wobbly table with two mismatched chairs and a few wooden crates repurposed as shelves holding a sparse collection of worn-out items. Yet amidst the stark poverty, there were small, heart-breaking attempts at creating a home. A child's colourful drawing, taped to the wall a small wilting flower in a chipped teacup. And then two small figures erupted from the shadows of the room with squeals of delight. "Mommy, Mommy, you're back." Two little girls no older than 6 and 8, barefoot, and clad in faded mended clothes, threw themselves into Sarah's arms. Mr. Anderson recognized the names from the HR file, Lily and Emily. Lily, the older one, had Sarah's serious eyes, while Emily, the younger, was a whirlwind of bright, untamed energy. Sarah dropped to her knees, her earlier weariness momentarily forgotten, as she embraced her daughters tightly, her face buried in their tangled hair. A genuine, radiant smile transformed her tired features, a smile so pure and loving it was like a sudden burst of sunlight in that dim, oppressive space. "My darlings," she murmured, her voice thick with an emotion that resonated even through the grimy wall. "I missed you both so much." From his hidden vantage point, Mr. Anderson watched, frozen. His carefully constructed world, his assumptions, his entire understanding of the woman who cleaned his restaurant began to crumble. He saw Sarah gently lead the girls to the small table. With a tenderness that belied her own exhaustion, she unpacked the containers of leftover food from the golden plate. Tonight it was a portion of roasted chicken and some creamy risotto, food that his wealthy patrons had picked, and perhaps even sent back, now a feast for these two hungry children. Sarah carefully divided the chicken and risotto onto 2 chipped plates, ensuring each girl received an equal share. Lily and Emily watched with wide, expectant eyes, their small hands clasped together in anticipation. "There you go, my loves," Sarah said softly, placing the plates before them. "Eat up. You must be starving." The girls needed no further encouragement. They ate with an innocent, unrestrained hunger, their small faces alight with joy. Little Emily hummed with delight as she devoured her chicken, occasionally looking up at her mother with a mouthful and a radiant, food-smeared grin. Lily ate more slowly, more deliberately, savoring each bite. And Sarah simply watched them, her chin resting on her hand, that soft, loving smile fixed on her face. She didn't take a plate for herself. She didn't touch a morsel of the food. As her daughters ate, she poured herself a glass of water from a pitcher on the table and sipped it slowly. There was no other food visible in the tiny room. No bread, no fruit, nothing. Mr. Anderson felt a physical blow as if someone had punched the air from his lungs. His chest ached with an intensity that was terrifying. He saw it all now, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. The relentless fatigue in Sarah's eyes, her thinness, her polite but persistent requests for only leftover food, the worn silver bracelet that perhaps represented a time before this crushing hardship. She wasn't just poor, she was starving herself to feed her children. The food she brought home, the discarded luxuries of his world, was their lifeline, and she was their unwavering, self-sacrificing provider. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to still the sudden, violent thumping of his heart. The term broke his heart, a phrase he'd always considered a sentimental cliché, now felt like a literal, agonizing truth. This quiet, unassuming woman who scrubbed his floors and polished his silverware possessed a strength and a depth of love that shamed him, that shamed the casual opulence of his entire existence. He thought of the half-eaten steaks, the barely touched desserts he'd seen cleared from tables at his restaurant, waste that could have fed this small, struggling family for days. Tears welled in James Anderson's eyes, hot and unexpected. He, a man who hadn't cried since his own mother's funeral decades ago, felt them spill over and trace burning paths down his cheeks. He didn't bother to wipe them away. The sight before him, of a mother's profound sacrifice, of children's innocent joy in the face of such dire privation, had stripped away every layer of his practiced composure, leaving him raw, exposed, and utterly devastated. He couldn't watch any more. The intimacy of their struggle, of Sarah's silent, heroic battle, felt too sacred for his intrusion. With infinite care, making less sound than a whisper, He backed away from the door, retreating into the deeper darkness of the landing, his entire being shaking with an emotion so powerful it threatened to consume him. He turned and fled down the creaking stairs, out into the cold, indifferent night. The image of Sarah's loving, hungry smile seared into his soul. He knew with a certainty that settled into the very marrow of his bones that his life and hers had irrevocably changed in that tiny, impoverished room. The drive back to his sprawling mansion in the city's most exclusive enclave was a blur for James Anderson. He moved through the familiar motions, parking the sedan in its designated spot in the cavernous garage, nodding absently to his night security guard, stepping into the silent, marble-floored immensity of his home. But his mind, his very soul, was still trapped in that tiny, desperate room on the other side of the city. The sheer, unapologetic luxury of his surroundings now felt like an affront, a vulgar display. The antique tapestries, the curated art, the soft, ambient lighting designed by a renowned architect. It all seemed to mock him, to highlight the chasm between his existence and the brutal reality Sarah and her children faced daily. He poured himself a generous measure of a rare, single malt, a comfort he usually savored, but tonight the expensive liquor tasted like ash in his mouth. Sleep was an impossibility. He paced the length of his enormous living room, the city lights twinkling far below, like a distant, indifferent galaxy. The image of Sarah's smile, so full of love for her children, yet so shadowed by her own hunger, was burned into his retinas. He saw Lily's serious eyes, Emily's unrestrained joy over a simple meal of leftovers. Leftovers. The word itself felt like a condemnation. His restaurant, a temple of gastronomy, generated mountains of perfectly good food that was often discarded without a second thought. And here was one of his own employees, a woman who worked tirelessly to maintain the pristine image of his establishment, literally starving so her children could eat those very discards. A wave of profound, suffocating guilt washed over him. How could he have been so blind, so insulated by his wealth and privilege? He thought of the countless times he'd walked past Sarah in the hallways of the Golden Plate, barely registering her presence beyond a cursory nod, if that. He was a man who prided himself on his perception, his ability to read situations and people. Yet he had looked at Sarah and seen only a cleaner, a uniform, a function. He hadn't seen the mother, the warrior, the woman battling an invisible, relentless war against poverty. His mind replayed with excruciating clarity the incident with the dropped spray bottle, his own curt dismissal, the flicker of fear in her eyes that he had so casually ignored. "My sincerest apologies, Mr. Anderson. It won't happen again, sir." Her voice echoed in his memory, no longer sounding merely deferential, but heavy with the accumulated weight of 1,000 daily humiliations, the constant need to be invisible to cause no trouble, lest she lose the meager income that stood between her children and utter destitution. The memory made him wince a sharp physical pang of regret. He, James Anderson, had been the cause of one more small wound in a life already overburdened with them. He knew he had to do something. The question wasn't if, but how. A simple cash handout felt grossly inadequate, a temporary salve on a gaping wound. It might alleviate her immediate hunger, but it wouldn't change her circumstances, wouldn't restore her dignity, wouldn't give Lily and Emily the future they deserved. He could promote her, certainly give her a raise. But would that be enough? And how to do it without making it seem like an act of pity, without crushing the quiet pride he'd glimpsed beneath her weariness. He sank into a plush leather armchair, the one usually reserved for contemplating complex business strategies, multi-million-dollar acquisitions. He could strategize a corporate takeover in his sleep, could dissect a financial report with surgical precision, But how to mend a life, how to offer a hand up without inadvertently pushing someone further down with the weight of obligation or shame. This felt like an infinitely more complex equation. For a fleeting moment, a grim, self-deprecating thought crossed his mind. For all his power and influence, he felt utterly ill-equipped to handle something so profoundly human. He considered setting up an anonymous fund, but that felt cowardly detached. He thought about simply offering her a large sum of money, but he remembered the way she only ever asked for leftover food, never for cash. There was a fierce, albeit quiet, self-respect there that he was determined not to damage. The solution had to be more holistic, more respectful of the woman she was. It had to empower her, not just provide for her. As the first pale fingers of dawn began to stretch across the eastern sky, painting the city in hues of grey and soft rose, an idea began to form in James Anderson's exhausted mind, a plan that was both comprehensive and, he hoped, compassionate. It was ambitious, multifaceted, and would require a significant commitment, not just of his resources, but of his personal involvement. It was a plan that went beyond merely alleviating Sarah's poverty. It aimed to offer her a genuine opportunity, a chance to build a secure future for herself and her daughters, a future where her smile would no longer be shadowed by hunger and fear. He stood up, the weariness of a sleepless night heavy on him, but a new, unfamiliar sense of purpose thrumming in his veins. The guilt hadn't vanished, nor had the profound sadness of what he'd witnessed. But now they were joined by a steely resolve. He walked to his study, the first true light of morning illuminating the path. He knew what he had to do. The decisions made in the silence of that long, agonizing night would not be easy to implement. But he was James Anderson. When he set his mind to something, it got done. And he was determined to make things right, not just for Sarah, Lily, and Emily, but perhaps in some small way, for his own soul as well. The day after his sleepless night, James Anderson set his meticulously crafted plan into motion. His first call was to Mrs. Gable in Human Resources, his instructions precise and unequivocal. He then summoned his own executive assistant, tasking her with arrangements that were far outside her usual corporate duties, yet she undertook them with a curious, impressed efficiency. For Sarah, the summons came midway through her morning cleaning routine at the Golden Plate. A junior manager approached her, his expression a mixture of nervousness and formality. "Sarah Miller, Mr. Anderson, would like to see you in his office. Immediately." Sarah's heart plummeted. Immediately, the word echoed ominously in her mind. Mr. Anderson's office was the veritable nerve center of his vast enterprise, a place she had only ever glimpsed from afar, as distant and inaccessible as a king's throne room. Cleaners were not summoned there unless something was terribly wrong. Her mind raced a frantic slideshow of possible transgressions. Had she inadvertently broken something valuable? Had someone complained about her work despite her diligence? Or worse, had someone discovered her desperate nightly ritual of collecting leftovers? Had they found out about her squalid little room, her children? The thought sent a fresh wave of icy dread through her. Wiping her suddenly damp palms on her apron, she nodded mutely and followed the junior manager, her legs feeling like lead. The walk to Mr. Anderson's penthouse office suite was the longest of her life. Each polished corridor, each expensive piece of art they passed, seemed to underscore her own insignificance, her vulnerability. His office was even more imposing from the inside. A vast expanse of glass offered a breathtaking panorama of the city, but Sarah barely registered it. Her attention was fixed on the large mahogany desk and the man seated behind it. James Anderson, his expression unreadable. He gestured towards a plush leather chair opposite him. "Sarah, please. Sit down." His voice was calm, unexpectedly gentle, but it did little to quell the frantic beating of her heart. She perched on the very edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, bracing herself for the worst. Mr. Anderson regarded her for a moment, a thoughtful expression in his eyes. "Sarah," he began his tone, "even I've been with this company a long time. You've been a diligent and reliable employee." Sarah swallowed, nodding mutely. This was the preamble, she thought, the calm before the storm. He continued, "It has also come to my attention that you have been facing significant personal hardships, far more than any employee should have to endure." Sarah's breath hitched. Her eyes widened in alarm. He knew. Somehow he knew. She felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She braced for dismissal, for reprimand. But Mr. Anderson's next words were not what she expected. "And I want to say," he said, his voice softening with an uncharacteristic warmth, "that I have a great deal of admiration for your strength, your resilience, and your dedication, especially as a mother." Sarah looked up, stunned her mind, struggling to process his words. "Admiration, not condemnation, Sarah." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze direct but kind. "I'm aware of your living situation, and of Lily and Emily, and I want to help. Not out of pity," he added quickly, sensing her instinctive recoil, "but because you are a valued member of my team, and because it's the right thing to do." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, blurring her vision of the powerful man before her. He then outlined his plan, his voice calm and businesslike, yet underscored with a genuine compassion that resonated deep within her. He was offering her a new position, personal assistant to the CEO. "The role will be demanding," he explained, "but I believe you have the organization discretion and inherent intelligence it requires. The salary will, of course, be substantially higher." Sarah could only stare, speechless, as he continued. He had arranged for a new apartment for her and the girls, a clean, safe, furnished two-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, the first year's rent paid in full. He'd also taken the liberty of researching good local schools and had set aside funds for Lily and Emily's tuition, uniforms, and supplies. The dam of Sarah's tightly controlled emotions finally broke. Tears streamed down her face, not of shame or fear this time, but of a relief so profound it was physically painful. "Mr. Anderson, I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice choked. I can't possibly accept. This is too much." "Nonsense, Sarah," he said, gently but firmly. "You deserve this. Your children deserve this. Think of it as an investment in you and in their future. All I ask is that you bring the same dedication to your new role that you've shown in every task you've undertaken here." He pushed a small plain envelope across the desk. "This is a modest advance to help you with immediate needs. Your new role and new salary begin next Monday." Later that day, an internal memo circulated throughout the Golden Plate and Mr. Anderson's other businesses. It announced a significant across-the-board pay increase for all hourly staff, effective immediately. Furthermore, it detailed the establishment of a new employee support fund designed to provide assistance to any staff member facing unexpected hardship. The news spread like wildfire. There were gasps of disbelief, then cheers. In the bustling kitchens and quiet corridors, there was a palpable sense of gratitude, a renewed loyalty towards an employer who many now realized possessed a depth of kindness they hadn't previously known. The atmosphere in the Golden Plate that afternoon was lighter, more hopeful than it had been in a very long time. For Sarah, the rest of the day passed in a daze of surreal emotion. It wasn't until that evening, when a car arranged by Mr. Anderson's office dropped her Lily and Emily off in front of a pleasant, well-maintained apartment building that the full reality of his generosity began to sink in. The apartment was bright, clean, and warm. It had real beds with fluffy duvets, a small, sunny kitchen stocked with basic groceries, and a cozy living room with a comfortable sofa. Lily and Emily, after a moment of stunned silence, explored with wide-eyed wonder, their delighted shrieks echoing through the rooms. "Mummy, look, we have our own beds," Lily cried, bouncing gently on a mattress. Emily, clutching a new fluffy teddy bear that had been left on her pillow, tugged at Sarah's hand, her small face a picture of ecstatic disbelief. "Mummy," she asked, her voice full of awe, is this our castle now? And does my dolly get her own room too?" Sarah knelt, pulling her daughters into a tight embrace, tears of joy streaming freely now, washing away years of fear and quiet desperation. "Yes, my darlings," she whispered, her voice thick with unspeakable gratitude as she looked around their new safe haven. "Yes, this is our new beginning." The weight of the world, it seemed, had finally, miraculously begun to lift from her shoulders. The first few weeks in their new life felt to Sarah like walking through a sun-drenched dream. Lily and Emily blossomed in their new school, their initial shyness quickly replaced by excited chatter about new friends, kind teachers, and fascinating subjects they'd never had the chance to explore before. The dark circles under their eyes faded, replaced by a healthy, rosy glow. Their laughter, once a rare and precious commodity in their tiny, bleak room, now filled their bright, cozy apartment with an almost constant joyful music. For Sarah, witnessing their transformation was a balm to her soul, a daily affirmation that Mr. Anderson's incredible kindness had not been in vain. Stepping into the role of personal assistant to the CEO, however, was a different kind of challenge. The executive floor of Anderson Holdings was a world of hushed efficiency, of power suits, and hushed, important-sounding phone calls. It was a far cry from the clatter of the Golden Plate's kitchen or the solitary rhythm of her cleaning duties. Her new desk was a sleek, modern affair, equipped with a multi-line telephone that seemed to possess a bewildering array of buttons and a computer that hummed with complex software she'd only ever seen in movies. In those initial days, Sarah often felt like an imposter, a sparrow that had accidentally flown into an eagle's eyrie. There were moments of acute self-doubt, a gnawing fear that she would inevitably disappoint the man who had placed such extraordinary faith in her. Her first attempt to operate the state-of-the-art coffee machine in Mr. Anderson's private anteroom had nearly resulted in a minor cappuccino catastrophe, leaving her flustered and apologizing profusely to a bemused but patient Mr. Anderson. "It appears this machine requires a specific diplomatic approach." Sarah, he'd commented, a rare, almost imperceptible twinkle in his eye as he calmly rectified the situation. "It took me a good month to negotiate a truce with it myself." His light-hearted remark, so unexpected, had eased her mortification and made her feel a little less like an utter fool. But Sarah was a fast learner, and what she lacked in corporate experience, she more than made up for in diligence, meticulous attention to detail, and an almost intuitive understanding of people's needs, skills honed through years of quiet observation and navigating her own difficult life. She arrived early, stayed late, poring over manuals, practicing her typing, and carefully studying the intricate web of Mr. Anderson's schedule and contacts. She listened more than she spoke, absorbing the rhythms and protocols of this new, demanding environment. Mr. Anderson, true to his word, was a supportive, if exacting, mentor. He provided clear instructions, answered her questions patiently, and most importantly, gave her meaningful tasks, gradually increasing their complexity as he saw her capabilities grow. He never once alluded to the circumstances under which he'd hired her for this role, treating her with a professional respect that did more to boost her confidence than any overt praise might have. He gave her space to learn from her small mistakes and acknowledged her successes with a quiet nod or a simple, "Well done, Sarah." Evenings were now a cherished time. After picking up Lily and Emily from their after-school club, their small hands full of colourful drawings and their minds buzzing with stories, they would return to their warm, safe apartment. As Sarah prepared dinner in their sunny little kitchen, simple, wholesome meals she could now afford without a second thought, the girls would chatter about their day. Mummy Lily announced one evening, her brow furrowed, with the gravity only an 8-year-old can muster today. "In science, we learned about caterpillars turning into butterflies. Do you think we're a bit like butterflies now?" Sarah paused, a spoonful of stew halfway to a bowl, her heart swelling. "Yes, my love," she said softly, her eyes shining. "Yes, I think we are." Emily, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. "And our new school doesn't have that grumpy lunch lady, like the old one, the one who always said, 'I took too many carrots,'" she declared, making Sarah laugh out loud, a genuine carefree sound that had been absent from her life for too long. One particularly hectic Tuesday, Mr. Anderson was due to host a crucial last-minute video conference with a group of potential international investors. His usual executive assistant, a highly experienced woman named Ms. Albright, who had initially regarded Sarah with a polite but distinct professional skepticism, was unexpectedly out sick. Panic flickered briefly in the outer office. The meeting was in 2 hours, presentations needed to be collated, time zones coordinated, and sensitive documents discreetly managed. Mr. Anderson, emerging from his office with a furrowed brow, surveyed the situation. He looked at Sarah, who was already calmly pulling up the relevant investor files on her computer. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying no hint of doubt, "I need you to handle this. Collate the final presentations from each department. Ensure the video conferencing link is stable and distributed, and field any preliminary queries from their aides. Miss Albright's notes are on her terminal." For a moment, Sarah felt a familiar wave of apprehension. This was a high-stakes meeting, the kind that could make or break a significant deal. But then she saw the quiet confidence in Mr. Anderson's gaze, a belief in her she was only just beginning to feel in herself. She took a deep breath. "Yes, Mr. Anderson. I'll take care of it." For the next 2 hours, Sarah was a whirlwind of focused efficiency. She navigated complex spreadsheets, liaised with department heads who were initially surprised to be dealing with her, and handled a last-minute technical glitch with the video conferencing software with a calm that impressed even herself. She meticulously arranged the digital documents, anticipated Mr. Anderson's needs for the call, and ensured everything was in place a full 15 minutes before the scheduled start. When the call began, Sarah sat discreetly to one side, taking notes, ready to provide any support Mr. Anderson might require. The meeting was intense, the negotiations complex, but everything flowed smoothly. After nearly 3 hours, the call concluded seemingly on a positive note. Mr. Anderson disconnected, leaned back in his chair, and let out a long breath. He looked over at Sarah, who was organizing her notes. "The presentations were perfectly collated, Sarah," he said, a note of genuine appreciation in his voice. "And you handled that scheduling conflict with their Tokyo office very adeptly. Miss Albright herself couldn't have managed it better." A warm flush of pride spread through Sarah. It wasn't just the praise, but the acknowledgement of her competence, her contribution. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice steady, a small, confident smile finally reaching her eyes. "I was happy to help." In that moment, she wasn't just Sarah Miller, the former cleaner. She was Sarah Miller, the capable assistant, a woman who was indeed learning to fly. The ashes of her past were still a part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She was rising, 2 years had passed since that fateful night when James Anderson had secretly followed his cleaning lady home. 2 years that had transformed Sarah Miller's life, and in quiet, unexpected ways his own. The Golden Plate still thrived, a beacon of culinary excellence, but within the Anderson Holdings empire, a subtle shift had occurred, a current of human connection that had flowed from one extraordinary act of kindness. Sarah was no longer the timid, almost invisible woman who scrubbed floors in the dead of night. As Mr. Anderson's personal assistant, she had blossomed. Her innate intelligence, her meticulous organizational skills, and her quiet, empathetic nature made her exceptionally good at her job. She managed his chaotic schedule with grace and foresight, handled sensitive communications with diplomacy, and had become an indispensable part of his executive team. There was a newfound confidence in her, bearing a calm assurance in her eyes, though the memory of her past hardships remained not as a shadow, but as a quiet source of inner strength and profound gratitude. Lily, now 10, and Emily, 8, were thriving. Their new school had opened up a world of possibilities. Lily had discovered a passion for art, her drawings now confident and vibrant, adorning the walls of their cheerful apartment. Emily, still a bundle of boundless energy, had joined the school's running club and chattered endlessly about her super-fast new sneakers. They were happy, healthy, and secure, their laughter, the constant, joyful soundtrack to Sarah's life. The worn silver bracelet, Sarah's only link to her own mother, still graced her wrist, but now it chimed softly when she moved, a gentle reminder of how far they had come. The relationship between Sarah and Mr. Anderson had settled into one of deep mutual respect and quiet understanding. He was still her boss, the formidable CEO, but the wall of formal distance had been subtly eroded by shared purpose and unspoken gratitude. He had witnessed her unwavering dedication, her quiet competence, and he valued her insights, which were often surprisingly astute. Sarah, for her part, never forgot the magnitude of his intervention in her life, but she repaid him daily with her loyalty and her exceptional work ethic. One afternoon, Mr. Anderson buzzed for Sarah. "Could you come in for a moment, please?" When she entered, he was looking out at the panoramic city view, much like he had on countless other occasions, but his expression was more reflective now. "Sarah," he said, turning, "I was just reviewing the quarterly reports from the Employee Support Fund. The impact it's having. It's quite remarkable." Sarah smiled. "It was a wonderful initiative, Mr. Anderson." He nodded. "Indeed. It seems kindness is a rather good investment." There was a rare, almost wistful quality in his voice. He found his own life had acquired a different texture since that night. The relentless pursuit of profit, while still a driver, was now tempered by a deeper understanding of the human lives that powered his enterprises. He found himself listening more, observing not just balance sheets, but the people behind them. It was, he mused, a far more enriching way to do business. It was around this time that Sarah noticed Anna, a new intern in the marketing department. Anna was young, bright and eager, but Sarah saw the familiar telltale signs, the slightly too thin frame, the way her eyes would sometimes linger on the complimentary fruit bowl in the staff lounge, the worn-out shoes peeking from beneath her carefully pressed, inexpensive suit. Sarah recognized the quiet struggle, the effort to maintain a professional facade while battling unseen hardships. One evening, as Sarah was leaving, she saw Anna still at her desk, looking tired and a little overwhelmed. On impulse, Sarah stopped by. "Anna, are you all right? You're working very late." Anna looked up, startled, then offered a wan smile. "Oh, hello, Ms. Miller. Yes, just trying to get ahead on this new campaign proposal." Sarah's gaze softened. "It's important to take breaks, too," she said gently. She then did something she hadn't planned. I was just about to pick up some dinner on my way home. Far too much for just me and my girls. Would you perhaps like to share some? I find a second opinion on a good pasta dish is always valuable. Anna's eyes widened a flicker of surprise, and then relief in them. Oh, I couldn't possibly. Nonsense, Sarah said, her smile warm and genuine, echoing the kindness she herself had once received. It would be my pleasure. Besides, she added a light, humorous twinkle in her eye, my daughters insist my pasta is world-class. It's only fair to subject an impartial judge to it. Later that week, Sarah, in her capacity as Mr. Anderson's assistant, and with his full approval, discreetly guided Anna towards the resources available through the Employee Support Fund, ensuring the young intern received the help she needed without any loss of dignity. She remembered the shame and fear she had felt, and she was determined that no one else should have to endure that alone if she could help it. One Saturday morning, Sarah sat by her sunlit apartment window, a cup of tea warming her hands, watching Lily and Emily giggling as they attempted to build an elaborate pillow fort in the living room. Lily, in a moment of mock seriousness, was interviewing Emily with a TV remote for a microphone. Miss Emily Lily intoned, adjusting imaginary glasses as a leading expert in fort construction. "What is your primary challenge today?" Emily, giggling, replied, "The pillows are too wobbly, and Mommy keeps drinking all the fort-building fuel," pointing an accusing finger at Sarah's teacup. Sarah laughed, a rich, happy sound that filled the cozy room. This was her life now, a life filled with light, with laughter, with the everyday beautiful chaos of a happy family. The scars of her past were still there, faint lines etched on her memory, but they no longer ached with a constant pressing pain. Instead, they served as a reminder of her resilience, of the depths from which she had climbed, and of the extraordinary life-altering power of a single compassionate heart. She thought of Mr. Anderson, not just as her employer, but as the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable, and had chosen not to look away, but to extend a hand. His act had not just saved her, it had reshaped her, empowering her to become a source of strength for others. The peace she felt was profound, a quiet, steady joy that had been hard-earned, not just by Mr. Anderson's initial generosity, but by her own relentless efforts to build upon that gift. She looked at her daughters, their faces bright with innocent happiness, and knew that this beautiful, ordinary Saturday morning was the sweet fruit of a kindness that had dared to believe in hope, a hope that was indeed undying. And in her own quiet way, Sarah Miller would ensure that such hope and such kindness continued to ripple outwards. Sarah's journey from quiet desperation to earned peace and Mr. Anderson's own transformation truly show how one moment of seeing of genuine compassion can redirect destinies. How many unseen battles are being fought around us each day by people longing only for a chance, a sliver of hope. This story has touched us deeply, and perhaps it resonated with you too. What moment in their story moved you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts and any suggestions you have to make our future stories even better. Your feedback truly helps us create. If their journey touched you, please give it a like and share it if you believe it could inspire others. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more stories that explore the heart of human kindness. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep kindness close.